Thank you so much for your responses till now. They were great. Okay, so I guess one thing that a lot of people wonder is kind of how you got to apply and how you got the position that you're in now. So if you could just kind of talk about maybe the application process, or was it, did you do a hard application? Did you find a position through connections? Was it like through emailing? However, if you want to kind of explain that, it'd be great.
Yeah, I can start with that one. So I was not looking for a job in the States. I had kind of let that idea go once I started applying to a whole bunch of jobs and everyone was turning me down because I was international. I was done. And so I had already actually accepted an offer to go back to Brazil and work at an investment fund. But I had organized a conference at Georgetown for Brazilian students during my senior year, where I had met a ton of people. And I had gotten a lot of visibility because I was the executive director. So all of the companies, they would need to talk to me in order to participate. And so met a lot of people, made a lot of connections there. And one of the people that I had met knew the first hire of Brex. And the first hire was really looking for people to join the company. And at that point, Brex hadn't launched, which made it really hard to recruit people. So she actually reached out to me and she said, "Hey, this person referred you to me, would love to talk to you." And so I did. And I was just blown away by everything that she told me about Brex, about the founders. And so that was kind of how I landed the job. It was through the networking that I had done at a previous conference.
Cool. And I guess for me, it's a little bit of a long story, but essentially while I was at Georgetown, I was a junior. So the Georgetown Tech Alliance and the Career Center were launching this program called the Future Leaders in Technology program. And the idea was to try to encourage Georgetown undergrads to be more involved in tech. And so I heard about this and I was really excited. And so what they did was they provided you with a stipend to live in San Francisco pre-pandemic. And also they would match you to a company that was tended to be like had a Georgetown connection. So one of the companies I applied to was DigiSure, which is the company I work for today. The CEO and the COO were both Georgetown grads. And so I went through that application process. It was honestly pretty straightforward. And I got the position as a product management intern. So I got the job, but I truly wasn't expecting like a return offer. I think oftentimes when you're international and you're thinking about the job search, a lot of people's advice is that you should try to go for like bigger tech companies because they have like the resources to sponsor you, right? They have like an army of lawyers and like they have experience in doing that. So my plan for the internship was just to leverage the experience I had because it was a product internship and that's what I wanted to do. And then I would use that experience to apply for other jobs. And so my senior year, I did my full-time job search. It was pretty rough. I mean, I got far in certain cases, but I think being international definitely, there were times where I would get to a certain point and then they'd be like, oh, like the H-1B is a little bit complicated. So while I was going through that process, the CEO and COO, we kept in touch the whole time. And the CEO was actually nominated for an alumni award and he went to visit Georgetown. And so we like met up for a lunch. And so it was during that when we were just talking and he was asking me about my job process and he kind of floated the idea of hiring me back as a associate product manager, which was like the exact role that I wanted. So again, I didn't take it super seriously at the time because like, I didn't think that they would have the resources to do that, but we continued to keep in touch. And then one day I finally got like an official job offer. And when he called me, he told me that he had figured out like a possible options for my visa. And so what made me feel better was that, I had a kind of a personal relationship with the founders and that they knew that I was international and they were willing to work with me to figure out my visa situation. And so at that point, that's why I decided to accept the offer. I can go deeper into like what that visa situation is because it's probably like, Marcela probably knows this, but it's like not necessarily the typical like H-1B process. So, yep.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Yeah. I think I'll ask one more question before the visa question, and then we can get into the visa technical stuff. I guess my question was, what do you think are some things that ultimately kind of made you guys stand out? Was it your work ethic? Was it some skills that you had, some experience? I mean, you guys both talked about connections. Obviously, that was pretty valuable, and it's down to like communications. If you can touch upon that.
Oh, okay. I can go. Um, so it was really funny because I didn't think they were going to hire me back, but I really like working at early stage startups. It's really fun and exciting. And so I think when I was working there as an intern, I was really trying to find my own projects and like different ways that I could, make an impact on the company. That I would still have an impact even after I left. So I worked on things like I did focus groups, customer research for like potential insurance products that we were trying to launch. And I think me taking initiative in the internship left an impact on like the founders that I had worked with at the time. And I think the other thing was that I was very adaptable. I think when they hired me, they weren't really sure like what projects they would give me or even like what my internship would look like. And I think I was kind of able to, take whatever they threw at me and work with it. And I think that's a really, really valuable skill for anyone working at an early stage startup, regardless of experience, right? Like if you're coachable and if you can handle any situation, I think that's super valuable working at a startup.
Yeah, and for me, as I mentioned, I had taken the initiative to organize a conference at Georgetown, and that was totally my desire. Like Georgetown had nothing to do with it. I went after it. I participated in the sort of qualification process to get the conference to come to Georgetown, and I think that demonstrated a lot of leadership and is ultimately what like gave me the connections that I needed to get to Brex. So that's one. The second is I also did an internship at a company that's really prominent in Brazil. It's on Ambev. They are part of Anheuser-Busch that owns practically all beers in the world, and that is a really prominent brand in Brazil. It's considered like the place to be after graduation. So that really helped me as well because it was such a well-known company to work for. And then I would say that within Brex, what really made me stand out is what Karissa said, like being adaptable. So they needed someone in support, which was literally picking up phone calls, answering chats, answering emails from customers, which is not what I wanted to do right after graduation. I wanted something more technical, but I was willing to adapt and take the job. And it was an amazing learning experience for me. I was in support for a year, and it gave me the foundation that I honestly needed to grow at the company. And while in that role, I was actually able to really build on my data skills and my hard skills, and it wasn't what they were looking for, but it really made me stand out because when I started coding, everyone was like, wow, I didn't know you could code. This makes life so much better. And I could fix my own problems without having to rely on the engineering team. So it also just showed that I was a go-getter and that I could do things on my own without having to rely on other people.
Awesome. Okay, so if I'm understanding this right, you guys both started on an OPT, I imagine, and then now you're using something else, or you're in a different situation. Okay, so if you could kind of go into just once again, you have said it many times, but like what the visa is, how the process was, and like kind of what the next steps are, or how you're ensuring that you're keeping that visa. I guess if I'm saying that correctly, yeah.
Yeah, I can start off. I love talking about this because I spent so many months crying over this situation. So I'm happy to talk about it. So as I said, I graduated from the MSB and my majors were not considered STEM. So I only had a year of OPT after graduation. And so I graduated, I had a year of OPT, and as my year was coming to an end, they were going to file for the H-1B. But there was also the ability that Georgetown would actually convert my major into STEM, and it would retroactively count for me. And that has happened at multiple universities. So for example, Harvard, they recently changed econ to be STEM, and that applied retroactively to all students that had graduated from Harvard econ. And so I actually went to Georgetown. I begged all of the deans to make my open major STEM. And it was months. It took months of me talking to the deans. And at the end of the day, they said, look, the curriculum changed. We can make it STEM going forward, but we can't change it retroactively. And then I looked at the curriculum. The only thing that had changed is they added an optional course in computer science. So needless to say, I was furious. I had never been so heartbroken in my life. I was like crying in the MSB. It was ridiculous. Anyways, so couldn't get STEM. So my only real shot was getting an H-1B. If I didn't get the H-1B, I would be sent to Canada because Brex fortunately had an office in Canada. I would be there for at least a year, and then I could come back on an L1 visa. So that was like plan A and plan B. I was really fortunate to be chosen in the H-1B lottery first try, which does not happen. The chances of that happening is around 33%. And so I got it. And I'm currently on the H-1B, and I am applying for the green card. And I want to say here that Brex is really an outlier when it comes to sponsoring visas. So the Brex CEOs are both Brazilian, and they both came to the States for college. They really understand the whole visa situation, and they wanted to make it clear that at Brex, if you are qualified, they will try their hardest to get you to stay in the States and to keep you working at Brex. And that's something that I find truly amazing at Brex is I think around, in the beginning, it was like more than 50% of the company was international. Right now, it's, since we've grown a lot, I think it's around like 30%, but they pride themselves in, you know, helping you through all of the steps required to get you a visa. So the policies differ company to company, but Brex has a firm policy that if you need sponsorship, they will sponsor you.
I want to say when I was doing research on like sponsorship, Brex was definitely one of like the companies that like came up. I think you guys like wrote a blog or something about like how you hired internationals, and I was like, wow, like that's so crazy. So my story is a bit different. So I'm still on my OPT. I'm the same. So I was a STEA major. I begged the deans at the SFS to make it a STEM designation because I did take a bunch of computer science, data science, and math classes. Unfortunately, it didn't work. But so when I got the offer from my company, the CEO talked to me and he was like, "Look, I like kind of informally consulted with like the immigration lawyer, and they said that it's really unlikely for you to get the H-1B because it's really hard to justify that your major is related to your job. But we are planning to expand to either Mexico or Canada, and so I think the plan is we would establish a company there and then send you back on the H1 on the L1." So I joined the company with the knowledge that they were at least trying to figure it out. And like worst case scenario, it didn't work out. I got a year of experience in the US and then I would go home. Luckily, when I got hired, my boss, the one I currently work under, he was an international, so he's British, but he immigrated to the US and he had gone through this whole process. It was actually a lot more difficult for him because he didn't even finish college, so it was kind of harder to justify. So after kind of talking to him and also because of based on where our company was going, they decided to open a new office in Amsterdam because we're trying to expand our operations into Europe. And so my boss sat me down and he was like, here are options. Well, we can try for the H-1B, but our lawyers think that it's really unlikely that you're going to get it because it's really hard to justify based on the fact that you were like a public policy major, essentially. Or you can take a part-time master's program and then work with us, or you move to Amsterdam for a year on the L1. And so the decision I ended up making was that I'm just going to move to Amsterdam because I'm just going to take it kind of as like a life opportunity. And because I want to just get it out of the way so I can come back on an L1 visa. And once you're on the L1, you can apply for a green card. And for those of you who don't know, the L1 visa is a special visa for multinational companies. And so if you work in a foreign branch of your company for a year, there is a different visa that they can transfer you back to the States in. And the requirements are a lot less strict in the H-1B because there's no cap. They don't necessarily have to prove that your experiences and skills qualify you because you'd have to have worked in that foreign branch for a year. At least, so they can argue that you have specialized knowledge about the company and its operations to warrant you moving back. And so that's the process. I'm currently in the process right now of like figuring out my work visa for Amsterdam. And then after a year, we're going to move me back on an L1. Yeah, so that's definitely, I can see a lot of, like, I relate so much to Marcela and like crying over the visas because I just spent so much time thinking about it. So.
Yeah, and to add to what Karissa said, that's why people generally say when you're applying to jobs, go for the big corporations because it's easier to make this switch to go to another country and then come back because those are more likely to be like the multinational companies.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, guys. That was really informative for me too. I'm gonna just immediately let everyone ask any questions they have. So if you want to just unmute yourself or raise your hand or put it in the chat, do whatever. It can be about anything. It doesn't have to be about the visas. Please go ahead.
Oh, hi everyone. So I'm Ava, and I'm currently an economics master student in Georgetown University. So I have a question to Marcela. So as you just mentioned about like working with data, so I have a question about the data sources. I would like to know for fintech companies, what are some like data sources you guys use, and like where do you get those data, and what kind of data, like what kind of consumer data or potential consumer data you use, and what are some tools you guys use or models you guys use to analyze those data? Yeah, that's basically my question. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So let's get deep into Brex waters here. So Brex today has one main card product and one cash product. So I focus specifically on the card product. And Brex is really revolutionary because of the way we underwrite. So regular businesses, when you want credit, they usually pull your personal FICO to back that credit card, even though it's a business credit card. Brex revolutionized that in that we don't care about your personal credit. We don't care if you are a Brazilian that just came to the States and founded a company. We care about how much cash you have in the bank. And so we don't require any form of personal guarantee. We only really care about how much funds you have in the bank. So I would say the main source of data we have is bank data. So we use third-party providers to provide us with your bank account information. So if you, for example, are a startup and you just went through a seed round, we connect through this third party. We get all of your bank account transactions and we see that you have an inflow from, for example, YC, which is one of the most famous incubators in the Valley. Then we will give you a limit based on how much money you have. So that is the first one. For my portfolio in specific, we look at e-commerce companies. So aside from looking at how much cash you have in the bank, we also look at how much revenue you're making. And we do that through your bank transactions as well. So we will go through all of the transactions, see what is revenue, what is expenses, what is shipping, what is advertisement, and we categorize all of that information and use that to feed into our underwriting model. And then the third data source that I use mostly is Experian. So Experian is a credit bureau, and we use it to get derogatory information about your account. So if you have been delinquent with other credit cards, we'll see that. If you have any judgments, any liens, any legal actions against you, we will know that. So I would say that those are the three main data sources that I use on a day-to-day. And I primarily work with SQL. So I query a lot on SQL. I would say like that's half of my daily job, is to look at data trends using SQL, and then also use a data visualization tool called Looker, which was recently acquired by Google. It's kind of like a Tableau, and it has its own SQL language called LookML, which just facilitates data visualization. So when I want to share the data insights that I get from my analysis with the team, I usually will code it into Looker to make it easy to share with other people. I hope that answered your questions. Happy to take any follow-ups.
Yeah, that really answered my questions. Thank you so much for all those details provided.
Of course.
Oh, can I also ask another question to Karissa?
Sure.
So you also mentioned that what makes you outstand all the other candidates is that you show the company that you are very adaptable and coachable. So I would like to know, so what are some like strategies you use to show the interviewers like you are adaptable? Because like I think many people think that they are adaptable, but they don't know how to show other people that they can learn things very fast and they are willing to learn new things.
So I will say I think in the interview it might be a little bit, it's like different, right? Because in the interview, really all you can do is provide your past experiences and show how you learn from them, right? So like giving examples how maybe in the past you were given some sort of project or some sort of task where you maybe weren't sure how to tackle it, and then talk through how you worked through that process, how you added structure around it, how you clarified your goals around the situation, and what outcome it led to. Um, so I would say like in the interview specifically, like that's probably the example I would give, is just to have examples from your past ready to give. And I think part of that is then when you're, and you're in Georgetown and you have the opportunity, then seek out a lot of different types of experiences that you can talk about in your interview. I think that's something that I sometimes wish I did a little bit more of at Georgetown, was like kind of exploring my own, like being a little bit more maybe entrepreneurial, or exploring more like personal projects that might be, even outside of just like clubs and things like that. Like just things that you can easily talk about and like how you learn from those experiences. So.
Thank you very much.
Hi, can I ask a question to Karissa?
Sure.
So hi guys, my name is Basil. I'm a sophomore in the MSB, majoring in finance and OPM. I'm really interested in product management, and I was just wondering what advice you had in terms of trying to land product internships, especially because like it's kind of hard to have product specific experience.
Yes.
There's no like specific degree for it, so I just was wondering what advice you had.
Yeah. So for product management specifically, again, I would, I think to be honest, like the easiest way to get a product management job is to somehow get a product management internship, and product management internships are hard to get because it's a field that a lot of people want to get into. I would say like, I guess a way that you can prepare yourself for it is, first of all, like, as I said, I think it's good to try to do your own projects, try to build your own products. I think that's like the best way that you can learn. So, if you have like an app idea that you want to work with your friends or things like that, I think that especially like to companies like startups, having examples of those types of things that you've done and how you've thought through them is like the most helpful. And so I think just in your day-to-day, even like thinking through like the products that you use, putting a more critical eye on them, like why do I like Instagram? What about Instagram do I like? How would I improve it? Those sorts of things help you in product interviews. There's also, books you can read. So cracking the PM interview, and just keeping track of like what's happening with like apps that you like, and things like that. I think just like kind of honing that product intuition is something that you don't necessarily need formal experience to do. And it's something that, especially the Silicon Valley way, is that you do it yourself, right? And then I think the other thing is for product management, I think there's a misconception that you have to be a software engineer to be able to do product. I don't think that's true, but I think it is helpful to learn at least how to communicate with software engineers. This doesn't even necessarily mean that you have to know how to code, but it means that you should understand software development processes, and you should understand at a high level what things are, right? So what is an API? Like, how does that work, right? So I think those sorts of things you can kind of look into. I mean, learning how to code, I took computer science classes. I think it's helpful in understanding how engineers think, but I don't necessarily use those skills in my day-to-day job as a product manager. Another hard skill that's very useful is learning some basic data skills. So like Marcela mentioned SQL. I use SQL a lot too. I probably don't use it and as like intensely as she does, right? I make very simple queries, but it's just, when you're working in product management, a lot of times you're trying to validate your assumptions with data, right? When you're trying to decide whether you should build something, you need data to back that up, right? You need to make a case for it. And so I think, taking some basic data analytics or data science classes while you're at Georgetown, that was really helpful for me. The Python classes and the SQL that I learned on my own are actually skills that I use in my day-to-day. So I guess those are like, in terms of like skills, that's what's helpful. And then in terms of just like getting a product management internship, obviously, I mean, apply for them. But I think, I think something you can learn from me and Marcela's experience is like, you should really lean on your networks. And I got my internship through Georgetown, and I found during my job search process that anytime you talk to a Georgetown alum, if you're trying to get into tech, more often than not, they're just excited that someone else in Georgetown is trying to get into tech, and they're willing to help you with that, right? So I think that's probably like the most helpful thing. But yeah, I think definitely, honing your product intuition is important. And I would really encourage all like Georgetown students trying to get to tech to try to pursue like their own independent projects that they can use to learn from and then to talk about in interviews.
Thank you for that. That was a great answer.
I'll also give an example. So we recently had a intern in my team, which is the credit team, and he decided to then go into a product role. And when you're already inside the company and we have proof that you are adaptable, you are reliable, you will get the job done, then it's easier for you to transition to the product team. As Karissa said, it relies very much on internal information and how much you know about processes and products that already exist. So if you get an internship with another team, you can probably eventually move into the product org.
That's actually like a really great point, and something, entry-level product jobs and product internships are extremely competitive because it is like a field that's super hot right now. And so even when I got really lucky that I ended up getting an entry-level product position, but in my own job search, I really widened my scope. I was applying for a lot of more like business analyst and like journalist type roles, because I think at that point it's also helpful to see if the company if you're interested in the company, and then if you can transition into product later. So I think, yeah, being open-minded in terms of what product is important, because most jobs that you do in a tech company will relate to product somehow, right? If you're working for some support, you can understand like intimately the needs of your customers. And if you're, like you're a data analyst, and those skills again are going to help you in product. So I think being open-minded is super important.
Anyone else have a question, comment, or anything?
I would like to ask more like an open answer question. So because I'm quite interested in fintech industry, so I'm always thinking like why mobile payment like this payment method is not that popular here in the US compared with other like developing countries like China or maybe India. So I guess I've already discussed that with some like other people working in financial industry, like traditional financial industries. But I guess maybe I can get more ideas with you guys who has already worked in fintech companies. So would you like to share some insights about that? Thank you very much.
Yeah, so I'll share my take and then Karissa can share hers.
Yeah.
So the US payments market is, from my standpoint, very much outdated. So if I compare it to Brazil, for example, Brazil had a very high inflation in like the 60s and 70s, which made it necessary for you to be instantly able to transfer money to another account. Because if you waited like 3 days, like the ACH method in the States takes, your money is worthless in 3 days. So the US never had that sort of happening, which accelerated the technology in the payments field. So there are a lot of rails, payment rails in the US that are still not comparable to other countries. So that's number one. And number two, in regards to mobile, in China, there are very few players in the payments industry. In the US, there are millions. So there are a lot of processes in the payments chain. Like there's the acquirer, there's the issuer, there's a network, there's a processor. So there are a lot of players that need to work together in order to make it work. And right now, there's no real incentive to make all of these players work together. So that's why we're not moving as fast as China, for example. That's why that there are so many different sort of players and offerings in the market, because everyone is competing with each other.
I mean, I would agree with that. I think the one thing I would add is, I don't know if you've heard of the concept of leapfrogging. I actually learned that in one of my SIA classes. But essentially, in my opinion, and this is really based on my opinion and like coming from Indonesia, is that the US had a more like mature like financial institution, like had more mature financial institutions, both in terms of regulations and like how they worked, right? Like the US probably figured out like banking first out of like, not first, but like, you know, banking in like the modern way faster than a lot of developing countries did, which means that now when they're making the transition, they have a lot more things that they would have to change, right? Like they would have to work around these regulations. They have all these like legacy systems that they had already built and had already been like entrenched into like everyday life. Whereas like countries like Indonesia, China, India, they were able to leapfrog, which meant that they didn't go through the same process of kind of developing those financial institution and financial legacy systems. They're able just to skip ahead. So like, you know, they saw that mobile payments was able to be a thing. They don't have to work with like kind of the same legacy regulations, institutions, in order to make it work and in order to make it happen. And so I think it was a lot easier for it to happen that way. I think that's the same reason why like mobile in general blew up in developing countries, right? Like they, you know, you don't like in the US, you have like people using like landlines and things like that and having all this infrastructure and then making the switch. Whereas like in other developing countries, like they were able to just make that switch without needing to like build all that infrastructure in the first place. So I think that's like another major reason. Yeah.
Yeah, and a major example of that is with the stimulus checks going out right now.
Yep.
They are physical checks.
Yeah.
Which is crazy if you think about it. It's like people are mailing checks. It's 2021.
Yeah.
Know, and the government is mailing checks. So
yeah.
Thank you very much for sharing those points. Yeah, it's very helpful and useful.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone have a question you want to put in the chat or unmute yourself? Otherwise, that's okay. We can end it here. I don't know if you guys have any last minute advice, Karissa or Marcela, but otherwise, thank you guys so much for joining. I think this is really useful for all of us, honestly. Any last words?
My last word is you guys should definitely look into the Future Leaders of Technology program in Georgetown. If you're an undergrad, you should be able to work with it. Other thing is, be open-minded to working at startups because the experience is so great and that you will learn so much quicker. Even though it's really intense, you will learn so much quicker than you will at a bigger company. And finally, like, feel free to reach out to me whenever, as I said, like, Georgetown alums are always super happy to talk about their experience in tech. And so feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to connect you with other people I know, or just cold, email and LinkedIn people too. Like, that's worked well for me in the past.
Yeah, agreed. Also very open to talking after this coffee chat. Feel free to email me. And the other thing I would say is don't get discouraged. I got a lot of no's when applying to big companies. I would get to like the second round of interviews and people would say like, oh, you're an international student, like this job doesn't sponsor. And so don't get discouraged. There are a lot of companies out there looking for good qualified people, and knowing that you're at Georgetown means that you are qualified. Don't let anyone tell you that you're not. So just keep on looking. And as Karissa said, be open-minded, look at startups. I never thought I'd be working at one, and I wasn't even like considering it. So definitely look at startups, and yeah, feel free to reach out to me and I'll put you in touch with other people, or I will be happy to help.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I wish you all the best, and thank you all for coming. Hope you have a great day and a great week.
Thanks, Luca, for organizing.
No worries.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.